our technology is meant to do good and to not be harmful. We think that, in absence of a lot of sort of legal and regulatory sort of laws out there, that there are a lot of informal standards that can be adopted. There's a lot of misinformation on the topic of the technology. So we paint a set of first principles, and that is meant to be, a general sandbox to play in, that you don't have to rethink every scenario that exists, that we can point back to it.
Welcome to the Peak IDV Executive Series video podcast, where I speak with executives, leaders, founders, and change makers in the digital identity space. I'm your host, Steve Craig, founder and chief enablement officer of Peak IDV. For our audience, this is a video first series, so if you're enjoying the audio version, please check out the full video recording on executiveseries.peakidv.com, where you can watch the full episode, you can read the transcript, and access any of the resources or links from today's conversation. This week, I'm super excited to speak with Dr. Brendan Klare, Chief Scientist, President, and co-founder of ROC. ROC is the only American-made multimodal biometrics provider. ROC is trusted by the U.S. military, law enforcement, and leading FinTech and digital identity brands. Prior to co-founding ROC, Brendan received his PhD in computer science from Michigan State University. And prior to his academic studies, he served in the 75th Ranger Regiment of the U.S. Army. I first met Brendan many years ago when I was leading product for a document-centric identity provider. We were adding automated face biometrics to our stack for the first time, and one of the science leads from a recent acquisition told us we absolutely had to verify or we had to evaluate ROC, then known as Rank 1 Computing. Welcome, Brendan. Thank you for making the time to be on the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much, Steve. You're one of my favorite people in the industry, so I really appreciate this opportunity.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, let's get started. For those that have not heard of ROC, can you tell more? Like, what's your typical elevator pitch?
Yeah, anyone with biometrics, identity, or video analytics requirements, we're here in the market as a trustworthy provider who can deliver to your team top-tier accuracy, algorithmic solutions, best-in-class hardware efficiency, and second-to-none partnership support. We don't overthink how to do business. We are engineers at our core, and we are really setting ourselves up to be a long-term partner for any of the challenges that you may face.
Excellent. People may know your company as Rank 1 Computing, but you recently rebranded to ROC. Can you share what drove that rebranding and this new brand identity?
Yeah, it's probably no secret to anybody who's followed us over the years that marketing was maybe not our strong suit in many ways, and that's changed here recently with some really incredible talent that's joined the team. The rebranding, it's both to ROC. It's a little simpler to recognize. Some people don't know kind of the dorky background of Rank 1 Computing. So ROC, if you have a background in machine learning and pattern recognition, there's a receiver operator characteristic, which is a way to measure and visualize trade-offs of type 1 and type 2 error. So that was the genesis of ROC. Rank 1, if you're in an image retrieval scenario, is the top search result that you get as well. Some people don't really resonate with that all the time if you're not sort of a dork. You spend a lot of time in those circles. And if you think about where we are, we're in Denver, Colorado. We have company offices also in Morgantown, West Virginia. The mountains is a real pillar of strength. There's a lot of long-term presence that are there, a lot of reliability. That is all part of the genesis of our name right now. And so we're really, doubling down on that, trying to make it a little simpler to recognize us, just be a little cleaner and better looking. We have some pretty incredible people who've joined us recently to try to make our market presence the same as our technology, which is very clean and sleek.
I got to say, I love the new branding, and I'm a bit jealous because I called my company Peak IDV, and I've got mountain imagery in there as well, but you've got that up arrow, very simplistic designs. Is very, very cool. Well, very well done. And congrats on the new brand identity. But before we go deep into ROC, I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into your personal background and your origin story. Can you share about when you decided that you were going to join the Army?
I was fascinated with math and science, and that's something that has been a big passion of mine. And I think if you look at a lot of younger people out there who are sort of transitioning from teenage years into adulthood, and it's hard to take everything seriously and find everything interesting. And there was a series of events happening. Learned about the Army Rangers, the challenges that are there, and I don't think that I was ready to take full advantage of the educational resources, that are here in this country, which are phenomenal. Needed to get some stuff out of my system, jump out of some airplanes, blow some things up, kind of gain a appreciation for the value of an education as well. So that's how I ended up in that journey. I'm pretty passionate and intense person for those who know me. So I think there's a lot of 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds out there that probably could really benefit from it. Our nation's armed services are unbelievable, absolutely incredible. All the intangibles you get from that. I think it's hard in some ways to put a pause on your life, to put a pause on your career, put a pause on your family, particularly with the events that were happening around that time. But even just from a selfish perspective, if you don't do it in the service of others, which to me, I come from multiple generations of veteran service to our nation's armed forces. I think it's four consecutive. I'm the fourth generation of combat experience, on behalf of our country. But even outside of that, just for personal growth and structure, it's a really valuable thing, and that's how my experience played out, fortunately, as well. And I know that's not the case with everybody. I mean, there's a lot of different experiences that can happen, and there's some people, they never come back, or there's some people that are never physically the same or mentally the same. So I do feel very fortunate that was not the case with me. It was real positive experience, though. I often refer to it as the most fun I never want to have again.
We appreciate your service, Brendan, and for your family's heritage in the armed forces. When I looked at the time that you were a Ranger, 2001 to 2005, I mean, that was a really transformative year for us. We had the September 11th attacks, and the Patriot Act, the War on Terror, Operation Iraqi Freedom, the war in Afghanistan. It's like 9/11 was one of those watershed moments for us, and it had been almost a decade that we had had any major conflict. The Soviet Union had collapsed, the Gulf War had settled. Do you remember where you were when we had those attacks on our soil, 9/11?
I do. I guess most people do. I had a bag packed in my Army recruiter's office, about to ship to basic training at then Fort Benning. And actually, I had a medical injury, sort of unrelated to anything. And I was determined to ship. And they were telling me, well, hey, I think we have to tear your contract up. I don't think that you're going to be able to ship. Like, you have to redo this whole process again. And as we're talking about that, somebody comes running in, one of the recruiters is like, turn on the TV. And, that was 9/11 for me in that moment. And it did turn out that my contract was null and void. So I both joined the Army before and after 9/11. I had to go through the whole process again.
Yeah, I was actually working at a bank. I was a bank teller, and no one came in to the bank that day. It was very quiet. And then everyone was just glued to their TV, at least I was in California. But I feel like September 11th has really changed the global geopolitical landscape. It's changed identity verification, how we think about trust in the world. I understand you also did 3 deployments in Afghanistan. How did your time in Afghanistan influence your career and your future interests?
Yeah, directly, probably very little. So, I was a Army Ranger in the truest sense of the word. I was enlisted infantryman, 3rd Ranger Battalion. We were the front lines of everything that happens there. My experiences are probably lighter than a lot of my colleagues. I have some guys I served with that ended up on different paths and different missions that saw things that I never personally saw. Indirectly, the impact of that was tremendous. The adversity, obviously, that you face in those scenarios is high. The amount of professionalism, particularly when you're working with the special operations community, within the U.S. Army and the Department of Defense, it's almost impossible to describe for anybody who has never worked in those environments. And we're Army Rangers are a tier 2 element, so we do our own direct action missions. We also support tier 1 elements, like Delta Force and SEAL Team 6, and working alongside those guys, who are career professionals in that community. You realize how serious things are, and if you want to be good at something, you have to be very dedicated to it. And you can't just casually take interest in something. So those are the things that stuck with me. And I think if you look at running a technology business, that bit is the same. if you look at how these structures are set up, though, in like the special operations community or just, a larger infantry, division, there's a complete and utter deference to leadership. There has to be. You do not have the liberty when the proverbial blank hits the fan, to be questioning who's in charge. To be having disagreements of opinion. And so that's a world where it's just like you fall in line and you do exactly what you're told. Or if you're a leader, you tell people what to do, and everybody operates in complete concert with one another. In a technology company, it's a little more chaotic, I would say, by design. And that's really our culture here, is that, at the end of the day, there's certain people that are paid to make certain decisions. And when we get to that point, we all fall in line and do it. But what leads up to that is intentionally a little chaotic in a good, polite, professional way. That we have a motto here at ROC, for example: hang your ego at the door. So when we go into a meeting, I mean, you could be the CEO or chief scientist of the company, or you could be somebody who's been here, for a year and, got out of college recently. The right answer is the right answer, period, point blank. And you're expected to advocate for the right answer. Sometimes it's subjective, what is or is not the right answer. So those are also things that I would say, sort of via negative example, I learned through the military, is that is not the right way to run a lot of organizations. Even in an incredible unit like the 75th Ranger Regiment, there's some of the best people I've ever met, and there's some people that are really difficult to work with, but they're also incredible at certain aspects of the job. And you can see areas of bad leadership with some of those folks, and it really paints a picture of how you should never lead, particularly when you're not into a military environment. And we see people, even who don't have military experience, who try to run companies in an authoritarian manner. Which again, at the end of the day, somebody has to make a decision. People need to get behind them when that time comes. But they think they know everything. They want everybody to just do what they told. There's some aspect of ego that gets involved in it, and it's really harmful to so many people. So I'd say indirectly too that was pretty impactful to get such an exposure.
Leadership is a common theme when I speak with those who have served in the military and they've gone into the commercial and private sector. That those are some of the best lessons they learned, but to your point, you can't always take that hierarchical authoritarian approach as you go into a technology company. Fortunately for you, you transitioned from the military life into academia, which is a completely different area. You started knocking down degrees, BS and CS, MS and CS, and then you went on to be a Spartan PhD candidate and eventually earning your PhD with Professor Anil Jain. When did you first decide, hey, I'm just going to go on a tear and get all the degrees? And then when did you decide, hey, I want to dedicate my life to biometrics?
Yeah, great questions. When I got out of the Army, I mean, I was 100% focused on getting my bachelor's degree in computer science. That's where I had started before I joined the military. I got in trouble in high school because the computer science teacher there, which I was fortunate that we had that type of education in high school, but they didn't know too much about it. So it's like within a few days, it's like, more than the teacher. Not that I'm anything special in that regard, but, I both loved it and got in trouble with it. But having that initial exposure, I knew exactly what I wanted to do my professional career. No doubt about it. I wanted to develop software. So getting out of the Ranger Regiment, getting into education again, I went to University of South Florida, which is a great place down in Tampa. Did 90 credits in 24 months for my bachelor's degree to get that. Thought I was going to stop there and just go right into industry. My senior year, when I was taking classes, equivalent of senior classes, Professor Sudeep Sarkar at University of South Florida, who's one of the smartest people anyone will ever meet. He's still very active down there. I took his computational geometry class, which was really sort of a conduit into computer vision technologies. He actually, he saw my interest in it, and I wanted to develop software to track pitches coming from a pitcher in baseball, because this is before they kind of had that ubiquitously, and in all the sports broadcasts and stuff. And he set me up with all the camera equipment and computers, and we did a pretty cool job with it. I wouldn't say that would deploy, to the Colorado Rockies, perhaps. But anyways, that was my contest. So I decided to do a master's degree. And that's where it just gets so fascinating. So you start taking those courses in machine learning, you start taking those courses in computer vision, even just, the advanced, courses in operating systems and algorithms. I was so fortunate to link up with Professor Anil Jain. If anybody doesn't know who Professor Anil Jain is, he's has a 50-year history now of publishing pattern recognition and biometrics research. Some of the first ever work on automated fingerprint algorithms. He's one of the nicest, kindest, most naturally passionate people you'll ever meet. He really treats all of his students like they're children of his, and in a good way, though sometimes some need some of the true parenting on it. But it was really a partnership. It felt like in the PhD study, we achieved so much in the world of face recognition together. I learned so much, and then even when finishing, he I think is a little bit unlike some other professors, and this is something that all professors, and I think all professionals, period, should take note of, that what happens to his students after they graduate is equally as important as what happens when they're with him doing their studies. And there's some professors, and I don't mean to speak negatively in this regard, but I mean, it's a stressful job, it's a focused job, and publication count, your next grants and research funding is all that matters. And when the student's done, I mean, they're kind of on their own from there, and that's not the case with Professor Jane. And I'll talk about that here in a minute, because we'll talk about ROC CEO Scott Swan a little bit. And even there, there's really a small world that I've been fortunate enough to live in that started with working with Professor Anil Jain. So everything we're going to talk about probably from here forward about ROC and who we are right now, it has Professor Jain's fingerprints on it, and I'll forever be grateful for him.
That's great. That's great background. And that leads to the next question I have is around the founding of Rank One Computing. And I saw a post you did on LinkedIn a couple months ago where you're talking about the ROC intern program, and you made reference to your time interning at Nobilis. Can you share how the company started?
I was always going to start a company. I mean, that much was clear. I was one of 3 co-founders of the business. Some of the exposures you have, so you sit in academia, you see the smartest people on the planet solving the hardest problems on the planet, and you realize that they are changing the world, but they can only take it 90% of the way, typically. Both because it stops getting interesting after that, and it's a lot of work to do the minutia. So, like to build a face recognition algorithm that achieves very high accuracy marks, versus building the same face recognition algorithm that now can deploy as usable, scalable software to a host of use cases and customer personas, are two very, very different things. So that was one bit of exposure that made it clear that to really solve some of societal's problems and some of the opportunities that are out there, an academic career is not going to be able to do that. I went to work for a company called Nobilis, who's a really impressive, I'd say probably it's like a think tank. They're a nonprofit in the DC metro area. Through doing that, got a lot of exposure to how these agencies use and procure various biometric and computer vision technologies. Probably the biggest thing that I saw that was just, okay, there's absolutely an opportunity here, is how overpriced and poor customer experience there was in these industries. You have agencies that are spending tens of millions of dollars on technology that can't even talk to the people that are developing the algorithms. They can't even get access to new algorithms. An aha moment was when one of the most important national security agencies out there is using 10-year-old face recognition algorithms, despite paying maintenance fees every year. So they're paying for updates on this, but they're not getting algorithm updates. They're getting these frivolous software updates. And that just felt unacceptable. It felt unethical. And just from an engineer's perspective, it seemed like a smarter way to build and deliver technology. And so all of those were the factors that came together.
That's great. I didn't have all that background, Brendan. I know you started the company in DC, and then you later moved it to Colorado, to Denver. I think the first time you and I met in person was in 2017. And I actually looked on my phone. I took pictures of, we went to work in class. We went to this place called Whiskey Foxtrot, something. But anyways, I didn't take any pictures of us. It was just like the beer and the food. It shows my priorities for the time. But back in that time, there were 7 people total for ROC. Like everyone fit into a conference room. What does the team look like now in 2024?
Yeah, great question. And I guess as a bit of an aside, man, Steve, I really did always have so much fun engaging. We didn't know each other before our paths collided then. And for anybody who listens to your podcast that hasn't gotten a chance to work with you, it's just there's very few people that both are really smart on product and technology, but are just also easy to do business with, and it just makes life better and more productive. So it was cool that you believed in us at that time, and we did have fun. I actually also remember going out to San Diego, and I wish I remember the brewery we went to, but between Denver and San Diego, I mean, you got some of the best beer. I'll say it in the world. Maybe some say, yeah, just the U.S. But anyways, we share similar priorities, my friend. So good memory on working class. If anybody comes to Denver, that's still a great spot. Yeah, we were 7 people back then. Our first 5 employees were all engineers, all science background, and that was actually that way for about I think a year and a half. Next 2 hires there when we were the 7, it was now our chief financial officer as one of them, and who is now our chief partnerships and privacy officer, who's our general counsel, is the other. So a CPA and a Juris Doctor, lawyer. So it's always been very skill oriented here at ROC. We're over 50 employees right now, which I know in some companies where this the kind of the big tech booms might not sound big. We've never taken investment. We have bootstrapped this entire thing from the ground up. We've been profitable almost every year that we've been in business. So all of this is measured growth. If you look at our team right now, whereas we had to do a lot more sort of jack of all trades aspects of it, go look at some of our old marketing to get back to where we were at the start of the podcast to today, and you get real experts in those fields. It's really incredible and powerful to see. And we'll kind of talk about my transition into the chief scientist role in a bit, but getting people who are really good at stuff able to focus more squarely on their strengths and not generalize as much is very powerful. There's a lot more sort of overt professionalism to the company, and we've always been professional acting, but if you kind of looked at us, people might not have sort of felt that in some ways, though obviously the tech worked extremely well from the beginning. And part of this growth too, yeah, I think we have 3 people, maybe it's 4, who've left our company in the almost 10 years that we've been in business. The retention rate within our team is sky high. And that's no sort of random occurrence. It's every bit about sort of the DNA of who we are and the long-term mindset that these are 10, 20-year problems that we're focused on. And so we really, whether it's the fact that we're employee owned, so everybody, has a pretty good stake in the business, or talking about the hanging ego at the door, trusting each other. All those aspects are the same. So while we've grown a lot since then, just about everybody you knew then is still here now, and we're just a larger, more capable organization able to deliver a lot more to the marketplace.
That's a testament of the culture you've built. And what I really admired during those conversations when we were getting to know each other and our companies were doing business was you had this mission first, people always approach, which no doubt came from the military, but you were also adamant that you didn't want to raise venture capital. You're not looking for some exit. You didn't want to just blow this up and quickly go to market like some of the companies that have taken on lots of venture. Your ethos was to solve tough problems, and you just wanted to work with people that you wanted to work with. So I really, really admired that. How have you been able to maintain your values and culture? I mean, you alluded to being employee owned. Are there any frameworks or approaches you've taken to be able to maintain that culture?
Yeah, thanks for the compliment and the observations there. I mean, it is something that we take pride in. We take seriously. We hope to continue to keep this all together. When you grow as much as we have grown, and just in the last 3 years, we're about 3 times larger in employee count than before. And frankly, it's hard to grow more than that and keep this in place. So as much as we've grown a lot, we've tempered, sort of temptations to grow a bit faster because we could have via the bootstrap approach that we're doing this business model. The 50 people who work here now, so many of us have worked together prior to ROC, and that really helps. Or maybe we didn't directly work together, but we worked in sort of partner organizations. So there's a lot of known trust, between ourselves within the company. So that helps. When you have an engineering background, it could be good and bad in terms of like the business model that's there, but it does become very problem oriented. And the things that I believe can often really derail a company. There's a couple of things. I mean, manic behavior. So you hire, hey, we just hired 100 people, and then 2 years later, like, we just fired 30% of the workforce. The psychological toll that takes on people is tremendous. And that's something that, you never know what's down the road, but, you really want to avoid that. Also with customers, I mean, customer churn is a really difficult thing. If you look at our industry, even, with your former employer where we work together, who is still a thriving customer of ours, and we're just so thrilled to be able to support them. The lead up to, really where you all started taking technology operational, and then from there to where that operational technology is generating meaningful revenues. It's a very long period of time. And so to be able to take that long-term approach is important, and to be able to recognize that the customers are going to take a long time to build everything, and to support them along the way, to be a customer service organization that if you are working with us and you have an issue, you're going to talk to the person that built the technology, period, point blank. And there might be a business person involved in that conversation, but they're a facilitator. And that's what they're there for. They're not going to have the answer for you, and they're not going to pretend to have the answer to you. You're going to need to get that. So as we get bigger, I'll talk about some other, reasons why we're able to maintain this, but we do see this as scalable. We see this as common sense, and we don't think it's that hard to do personally.
Yeah, to summarize what I just heard is you really are making sure that the pyramid is employees, customers, shareholders. A lot of companies in corporate America today are shareholders, sometimes customers, and the employees last. I think if you take care of your employees and your culture, it'll take care of the innovation and your customers, and then ultimately the shareholders will benefit. I want to transition a little bit into something you've alluded to a couple times, which is you have a CEO, Scott Swan. You were the CEO from the company's formation, and then about the end of 2020, you became the chief scientist. Can you tell me more about that transition, like how you met Scott and how the company might have changed under his leadership?
Yeah, I mean, one of the best things I ever did was fire myself as the CEO. It was both for the company and myself. The phase that I was the CEO, I had to be the CEO. That's how we got to where we were at. We had a lot of people focused on the technology. That's my background as well. I'm a student of business, though I've never, I don't have any degrees in that. But we needed a real executive leader. We needed somebody that understood the market demands out there beyond just face recognition. We needed somebody that understood how different organizations purchase. And all these things is Scott Swan. I've known Scott for almost 15 years now. He was at the FBI. He spent almost 20 years at the FBI. He rose from being a copy clerk to a special assistant to one of the executive directors of the FBI. Which, if you don't know that organization, that's a powerful position that he was in. I remember actually when I was an intern at Nobles, and Scott comes, and Nobles did a lot of work with the FBI, and I heard like, hey, this guy's coming from the FBI. Everybody, sort of tighten your ties. This is back, people wear ties there. And here comes Scott, and he looks fairly young, and he still looks younger than he is. He's a little older than people probably might think. And there's a whole trail of people behind him, and it's just like I don't know who this guy is, but people seem to really want to move heaven and earth to support him. And I eventually got to work with him directly after the Boston Marathon bombing, which is another tragic incident. When that happened, there was over 100,000 images that people had taken around the finish line. I think 10,000 videos, because obviously everybody's filming the marathon. And after it happened, and we had no idea who did it, the FBI is reached out to the public and like, please send us anything and everything that you have. And the amount of imagery that they had received, it broke all the systems. This again, when I talk about hardware efficiency and scalability, this was an aha moment for us as well. But I got to work directly with Scott on a major issues study where, after the fact, after that whole incident cleared, the FBI basically said, how can we prevent this from happening again? And so Scott led a task force that Nobles was part of, to go and study all the market technologies out there for computer vision, machine learning, really video analytics. Fast forward to today, a lot of the knowledge that was learned there, a lot of the requirements, they haven't changed. What people wanted back then, they still want today. And some of it hasn't fully been solved and delivered yet. that's just like a sliver of my experience working with Scott, and he lived that world for about 20 years. He spent almost 5 years at our direct competitor after that in a very senior leadership position. I had talked to Scott every bit along the way, hoping that our worlds could collide. And, we were kind of a small fish. He was a big fish. But he always had an interest, and the stars aligned, and he came here, and you see it.
Do you recall the moment when Scott said yes and you knew that he was going to be joining Rank One Computing?
uh, yeah, it was like a series of moments, but yeah, you know when something's gonna happen eventually, and it was just like, probably the biggest feeling was like, I felt confident in it, but it's just, I hope that we can deliver for Scott, because he was sort of leaving a lot behind to come to us, and he saw that vision. And two, for him to kind of realize like, hey, we're not going to take investment for you to achieve your vision. We want to maintain control of this company so we can be in this for a long time to come. So yeah, it was really cool. And I think if you were to ask him today, he'll say it's one of the best professional decisions he ever made. But I'll let you ask him maybe at another point.
Yeah, that'd be great. I just in my mind, I thought you going, game on. Here we are, ready to go. It's time to grow the business.
Oh yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your products today. What are the core modalities that you focus on now?
Yeah, and we're still obviously a face recognition company, top tier in the NIST rankings. With that, we're still all of our algorithms. We are top in accuracy, efficiency combined. Nobody can build algorithms that are as fast and scalable as ours. That's just borne out in the benchmarks. So face recognition is still a big area of focus. Liveness within it, presentation attack detection. So we're ISO 3017-3 level 2 compliant. I look at my notes to make sure I say that correctly. Facial analytics as well, the ISO 29794-5 face image quality standards, which are now increasingly required for a lot of passenger travel. And even if you look at the identity industry, for doing identity proofing, you really need to control some of the capture process. So we have very strong algorithms there. We're in the NIST SIDD benchmarks on that. Fingerprint recognition, I mean, that's been one of the most exciting developments. A year and a half ago, we had no fingerprint algorithm available to license. Just a year and a half later, we're top 3 in the world in accuracy per the NIST benchmarks. We just published on the NIST latent fingerprint recognition benchmark. When we were published, our search time for a 32 million image database was 500 times faster than any other vendor in that benchmark. And we had top 3 average error rates in that. That's 15 seconds to search a 32 million database versus 42 minutes for the next provider. So that's the next generation capability, if there ever is one. Iris and tattoo recognition are capabilities as well. And video analytics. I mean, this is when Scott came in day one, he said, we're going to be a video analytics company. We're not just going to be a biometric provider. We are going to build computer vision algorithm. Gun detection, weapon detection is one of our biggest areas of improvement recently. Obviously, there's a lot of need for that, unfortunately, in society. We have some very important customers in that space. I think people are going to be really wowed by the capabilities the next year, in particular, as it's improving. License plate recognition, vehicle make model. Quietly, we are one of the strongest capabilities in industry in that area. Person recognition, person re-identification. We do a lot of special research projects as well. We're very selective about this, but whether it's DARPA, who has been a client of ours since day one in business, well, let's say like day 60 in business, IARPA, and a couple of these 3-letter agencies, we do a lot of specialized research projects for them.
Wow, your product stack has exploded with functionality. The fingerprinting technology. Can we double click on that a little bit? Like, what are some of the new use cases that opens up for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, it's the standard use cases that exist, but now it's opening up all new possibilities as an industry as a whole. Even just, I mean, you have these unsolved latent databases where people have committed heinous crimes. You have a capture of their fingerprint, it's in a database. The technology is so slow that you're really limited to the times that you can search those databases. So being 500 times faster, I mean, you can double, triple the size of the database, and it's a drop in the bucket. It doesn't matter. People that are routinely fingerprinted for background checks, in theory, could all be submitted against latent unsolved case files. We're the lowest error rate on the IARPA nail-to-nail data sets, which is a suite of about 13 different sensors for contact and contactless fingerprint capture. So I think we're seeing some of this move into the ID sector on the private side for fingerprint through contactless capture on a mobile phone. So that's an area that we're very strong at as well. It also really helps because our big goal, we really think that we're the most logical solution for the large government, national security agencies, critical infrastructures, and being a multimodal biometric provider really allows us to go and service those markets.
In the origin story, you were describing the market back when you got going was just a couple large foreign companies. These are very sensitive national security projects in some cases. One of the prevalent things in your marketing is the notion that ROC is this is American-made technology. How do you see companies latching onto that messaging, and has that driven a tailwind for Rank One or ROC? Can you describe how that's worked out for you, the messaging?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and to be clear, I mean, we're global citizens, so we love and appreciate everyone who's out there. At the same time, in the U.S. is a massive economy. The U.S. government is such a critical piece of how the whole world itself functions. So it's natural to have a desire in government agencies for U.S. tech. As the AI boom is happening right now, I think there's several things occurring that people really need to take note of. One is we are not spending the most money on artificial intelligence and computer vision in the United States, even Europe. And at least, if you kind of normalize for like what the cost of a given employee is, you take United States and Europe and add them together, and it's going to be less than China. They're so aggressive on this front, and they've also made it clear that they don't agree with the current world order. And we're seeing this, unfortunately, geopolitically right now as well. That there's a challenge to Western civilization at the moment. When you need to trust your technology, it really is important that you know who is developing it. So just being U.S. owned and quote unquote developed doesn't quite do it. I know companies that are U.S. companies that develop stuff overseas. So for us, it's all our employees that are building the technology. It's all people that sit here, in the United States that build it. There's a growing threat of poison AI that is out there, and if people who haven't heard about that, these models are very, very complex, and complex systems are hard to validate. And if they're hard to validate, you can put backdoors in them. And this is not like your traditional software scanning where you can sort of search for those vulnerabilities. People could set it up such that somebody, let's just say that you have a border security biometric system, and maybe you have a foreign piece of technology that's in there, and maybe certain people are actually set up such that they can clear right through and not match against certain watch lists that are out there, or they can assume multiple identities at once, while crossing through borders. That's but one example of things that can be done. How do you mitigate against that? It's really hard. You can't actually test against 7 billion people, obviously, on these algorithms. So really one of the first and foremost things you can do is work with somebody that you trust, a company that has first principles, a company that has a track record of not doing these things. You can search lawsuits that are out there against some of the biometric providers. They're very interesting, the ones that exist. There's accusations of Russian software developers putting backdoors into some of the most important biometric systems that are out there. There's other cases where just kind of poor ethical decisions have been made. So for us, when we talk about being U.S. owned and developed, obviously here at home, this is the number one market that we want to be strong in. So that's a key part of it. And then another part is just really continuing to paint the picture of we're a very simple company to understand. There's not a complex structure here, and so with that, we think it affords higher trust.
One of the points you just made around technology is the ethical use of technology and not building in these back doors, really being transparent in what you're creating. I want to call out something that you have on your website, which I haven't seen many companies do, which is publish a code of ethics. With the rise of AI, and there's all this talk about government regulation, I think there is an important part of that that's just self-regulation and self-governance. What's your company's commitment? Maybe we could summarize your high-level code of ethics for the audience.
Yeah, at the end of the day, our technology is meant to do good and to not be harmful. We think that in absence of a lot of sort of legal and regulatory sort of laws out there, that there are a lot of informal standards that can be adopted. There's a lot of misinformation on the topic of the technology. So we paint a set of first principles, and that is meant to be, a general sandbox to play in that you don't have to rethink every scenario that exists, that we can point back to it. We believe we were the first company to publish this. I don't think that's something to necessarily be proud of. This is something that maybe to be a little more ashamed of as an industry, that this is not something that is thought of more. There's no shortage of virtue signaling that are out there on any given topic. People want to take the high road and kind of follow the sheep on like, oh yeah, this is what you're supposed to do in this scenario, of course. And hey, are we going to make a bad decision? Sure, we're susceptible to that, and we really try not to. So when you have a set of first principles that the team really buys into, starting at the executive level, but then from there, every scenario on a case by case basis, you can further scrutinize it. You also empower, decision making within the executive team. There's not convoluted decision structures, so we have open, free flowing information to talk about this. We think that all helps to limit the misuse of the technology, to know who our customers are, to know what they're doing with the technology, and to trust professionals that have thought through these things. A lot of it too is a starting point. If you look at our software licensing agreement, we say it at period point blank, we can revoke access to our software if you violate the terms of our code of ethics. So that in and of itself, if you're a business person and you're in a business contract, you do not like that. That is uncertainty, right? That's ambiguous. These are not, sort of codified laws. This is our set of ethics that we present. It starts a conversation though. So now we can talk to you. Why are you concerned about it? You might have a very real, simple, innocent, reason that's just, bad for business to have that kind of uncertainty. That allows us to understand your use case even further. 95% of the companies out there doing really, really wonderful things, or the government organizations. It's kind of those 5% that you got to watch out for and be very careful.
On the ethical use of technology, one of the hot topics right now in the digital identity space is the use of deep fakes. And there's AI for good, there's AI for bad. We're all very concerned about AI for bad. This generative media democratization that's been happening is really starting to affect a fraudster or a criminal's ability to trick these systems. How do you see ROC fitting into this whole Gen AI ecosystem? You alluded to liveness detection, but are there other ways that you're thinking about the problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, obviously, deep fakes has really captured a lot of interest. For those who don't know specifically what a deep fake is, it's kind of creating a synthetic identity, or taking an existing identity and sort of recreating it and being able to do what you want with it. We get asked this question almost daily, like what do we do about deep fakes? It depends on who you are, but let's say for the bulk of the customers and sort of in the banking sector, know your customer, ID proofing. I think, Steve, a lot of the market that, you're most familiar and most catered towards. And there's a lot of fear, of, are we just going to get blown away by, the advancements here? If you look at, let's say somebody creates a deep fake, there's really two ways that they could use it with an identity system. One is a presentation attack. So yeah, I put it on a tablet or a printed photo, and I hold it up to the biometric sensor, like a mobile app, doing ID proofing, and use that hopefully to let that fake identity be accepted. The other one is to do an injection attack. So to sort of bypass the cameras, put it into the feed. So it's not a replay or presentation attack. You're kind of directly inserting it into the camera. In the first example, like presentation attack, you said it, liveness. I mean, that is the solution to it. We're seeing that liveness is increasingly looking like a solvable problem. I mean, there'll always be, a little bit of a cat and mouse game there because of how sensors change and how sort of fraudsters, look to present sort of replay attacks in different ways. But, overall, it looks like the accuracy of these systems from independent benchmarks are quite good. And, those vectors are being eliminated. Injection attacks, I mean, this is an area that we've really been focusing on lately as a full stack software provider. You need to be able to trust the source of the camera that exists. There's various methods, various tools that are out there. I'd say that this is both something that companies like ROC need to take leadership positions in, and deploying technologies that prevent people from being able to bypass cameras and insert a virtual camera in instead. Also, I mean, the two main players, Apple and Google, I mean, they control the mobile market, period. They are critical to the problem as well. And at some point, need to be able to provide higher level of assurance that you cannot bypass their cameras without it being known at the application level of a given system.
It's fascinating. I'm curious, with your history that we just discussed, you've been leader detection, video analytics, computer vision. Do you see a path for ROC into the creation of media? Like, is generative AI and creating content in your future?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer, like for generative AI and rock, is no. That's not something that we'll get into. Behind the scenes, under the hood, there's a few areas that it can have relevance and may already have relevance, without getting into too much of how the sausage is made. But in general, we're a discriminative AI company. If you look at machine learning literature, we develop discriminative machine learning methods, which really seek to infer information versus create it. So, short answer is no. I don't think that we'll be getting into that.
Brennan, we're almost at time. And if you've seen any of these episodes of Executive Series, like to go a little bit beyond what you can see on a LinkedIn profile. I'm really curious what you personally like to do in your free time. If there's any organizations you like to support, can you share more about you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I spend a lot of time with my family. I have an amazing wife, Jessica, and I have three amazing children. So that obviously is a big focus. Outside of that, here in Colorado, skiing, mountain biking. Right now, it is both skiing and mountain bike season, so that is quite nice. Our big passions: love live music, into all those hippie jam bands, Fish and Goose, Billy Streens, whatnot, cooking food, lifting weights, just trying to live a healthy, happy life, and balance. That's a big part. You talk about why we're here today. This is stuff that for all of our team, we really, really focus on. We shut down for 2 weeks over winter break. We force people to take time off as a business. This is a long haul. And if you don't have balance in your personal life, it's hard to sustain good creativity on the professional side. So that's sort of an organizational thing as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing. Well, as we wrap up on the conversation today, for those that are listening or watching, what kind of conversations would you like out of this for anyone to reach out to discuss anything that was shared?
Yeah, I mean, talk to us about your problems. There's a lot of use cases out there that are serviceable out of the box, and it might be the case for us that your problem is something we have an out of the box solution for. It might be the case that you have a more complex problem, and we might say, thanks, but no thanks, but we'll give you a lot of information and building up to that feedback. Or it might be the case that you have a complex problem that we don't have an out of the box solution to. We have a lot of the components for it. And we actually agree that it's a problem that needs to be solved, that there's a real business case for that. And we'll dig deeper. But, it all starts a conversation. And we really believe that we're an easy company to talk to, that everyone here is very approachable. Probably the best way to get in contact with us, just go on our website, fill out that little form, and somebody's going to get back to you in very short order. If you ever do start working with our technology, one of the first things you'll realize is we're there every step along the way. You're going to get to talk to the people who build it. These are tough systems to build. As you know, Steve, you've been on the front lines for a long time. And it takes a lot of cooperation and partnership to do it. And, we look forward to talking to anybody that wants to see if there's a way to work together in that regard.
Excellent. Well, I'll be sure to put your website URL and the resources as well as the contact form. Brendan, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. Your journey with ROC is really inspirational. And thank you for founding one of the foundational biometrics companies in our industry.
Appreciate it, Steve. Congrats to you on all your success as well. And I'm just really, really fortunate to get to connect with you again.